Those Edmonton Elks, they're sick. And I'm actually not going to be making a video bashing the Edmonton Elks. They are actually sick. Sick with, you know what? That damn COVID. Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And give an update on what's happening to the Edmonton Elks as the Week 4 game they were supposed to play or scheduled to play in Toronto against the Toronto Argonauts. However, that game got postponed as after the Edmonton Elks, when they played their game on the road against the BC Lions in BC, which they did win 21-16 if I'm not mistaken, it was reported that after the game there was an outbreak within the team, that 9 players tested positive for COVID, enough for the game to be postponed. And the procedure that the CFL has this season, that if a game gets postponed due to COVID and does not get rescheduled to get played, what would happen in this case, for example, being that it's the Edmonton Elks and the Toronto Argonauts, that the outbreak happened with the Edmonton Elks, that they would be forced to forfeit the game, and ultimately the Toronto Argonauts will get credited with the victory, 1-0 for the books. And then they also had the other provision that if there were 2 teams that had an outbreak, let's say for example if it was the Edmonton Elks and the Toronto Argonauts, then both teams will get credited with losses. But there has not been any word yet on what's happening to that game in terms of it being rescheduled yet. They have not found time for it, but the last few days that number has gone up a little, and actually as of this recording that number has since reached up to 14. So 14 members of the Edmonton Elks have tested positive for COVID, but since the game was supposed to be played yesterday as of this recording, the Edmonton Elks actually have not picked up any more positive cases, so hopefully that's the peak for the Edmonton Elks, so that they have 14 players currently that have tested positive for COVID. And I'll bring up a story that if the fact with the Edmonton Elks is that they have no more new cases, but the thing to keep in mind is that with that game being postponed and they did not play against the Toronto Argonauts, the next game that the Edmonton Elks are scheduled to play actually be my Calgary Stampeders on Labor Day, and I'm still hoping that that will happen. Don't want COVID to ruin Labor Day again for a second straight season, but for a totally different reason. But at least there has been no more positive cases. But another thing you've heard is that apparently the CFL was targeting all teams to have 85% fully vaccinated rate, and I saw that online that apparently the Edmonton Elks were like one of the lower vaccinated teams in the league. But if you continue on with the story, it talks about that tests were completed on Thursday, which was the scheduled game. That means the total number of positive tests among players remains at 14 since the team returned from the game against the BC Lions last week. And there was no players on the BC Lions that tested positive for COVID, because that would be the obvious place to look after the Edmonton Elks had their breakout, because that's who played the week before. And then it mentions all of Edmonton's Tier 1 players, coaches, and staff. They considered they received the daily testing, and that the team has been at home in isolation until August 31st. So that would be Tuesday, August 31st. So that would be when they would start preparing for their next game against the Calgary Stampeders. But that would be on Labor Day Monday, on Monday, September 6th. So they would have some time. So I think a lot would still need to happen if there is no game. Or hopefully, my team does not get sick with COVID. All I know that I remember in week 1, there was a couple players, both on Edmonton and Calgary, that were at least in protocol for COVID, but it was because they needed a second test to get out of it. And that both games obviously happened. This is the first time that the CFL has dealt an outbreak, but it also says the team has not identified any of the affected players who tested positive with the agreement of the CFLPA. And then I say the Edmonton's game scheduled for the week 4 against the Toronto Argonauts in Toronto was postponed, and ends up with a story saying that the Elks Tier 1 vaccination race is over 80%, but it's approaching 85%, which is benchmark set up by the CFL. But still, it seemed a little shocking to see that CFL has dealt with their first outbreak, and one game has been at least postponed. Still, they have not found time to reschedule it, but as long as it is not officially cancelled, where it won't go down the books. So at least what this means for the records is that there'll be 14 games in the books for every team this season. It's just a matter if someone is sick and gets an outbreak, would it go down just as a 1-0 victory for the case for the Toronto Argonauts if it comes down to that. But I'm just still following the story because that's who the Edmonton Elks are scheduled to play next, is the Calgary Stampeders on Labor Day. Maybe this will give Calgary an advantage, assuming everything else goes as scheduled as planned, because the Elks had to isolate, and you always hear stories about people who have fortunately got COVID that, yes, they maybe did not need to go to the hospital, but then they still feel like shit, long after it. I mean, unfortunately, I do have a few colleagues in the office that mentioned that they did get hit with COVID and that they still don't feel quite right from it. They did not need to have to go to the hospital, and you hear those stories about the long haulers, and all I've been suffering from it has been COVID fatigue and burnout associated with it. But and they also heard some stories that apparently there was a couple players on the Elks team that were fully vaccinated and still got it, and that is still possible. I am fully vaccinated myself, and yeah, we'll talk about that in a separate video about being fully vaccinated and attending stuff, including sporting events, but I'll put that in a separate video. That still possible, you can still get it, but it's just a matter of, instead of needing to go to the hospital for a few weeks, you just feel like crap for a few days and take care of yourself. That's the other alternative, but I just hope for the players involved that they get better and be able to fully recover, and hopefully have no more games that get postponed due to this, and everybody else gets to play their games. And I also don't want to miss the Labor Day Classic. It's enough to already miss it last year, and I did make a video talking about how much the Labor Day Classic's been a big part of on the days for a year, and big part of my life. And if you count 1995 from my first time that I attended the Labor Day Classic up till now, 2021, I've only missed 3. I remember I missed it in 1996 because I didn't have a ticket for it yet, or season tickets yet. I missed it in 2001 because I was stuck working. And then I missed it in 2020 because the season got canceled. That tells you how rarely I missed the Labor Day Classic. It has to take extraordinary circumstances for me to miss the Labor Day Classic. And it was missed last year. Hopefully not going to miss it this year because of COVID, but for a totally different reason. And then hopefully, everyone else has been fine. I haven't heard any other outbreaks. This has just been the only case for it, but still felt I had to make a video on it because it involves an opponent that is coming up next for the Calgary Stampeders on the calendar, and might be a big series to look back on for both teams, depending on how the rest of the season plays out, especially with my Calgary Stampeders now not playing with Bo for the next 6 games. So anyways, like to say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, home of the Flames, Edmonton Roughnecks, and Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, recapping games and stories, but I also do a variety of non-sports content when I do have time to make videos, which lately haven't had as much time between football games and just trying to grind it out, trying to deal with COVID fatigue and burnout. But I do have personal vlogs attempt to call me, and I have shared my experience with them on the road or a sporting event, which I have done the last few games. And hopefully with the Labor Day Classic, I plan to have my phone out. They capture now the introductions, the anthem, and the Jets flying over, because we do salute our armed forces. That's been the other tradition of the Labor Day Classic for here in Calgary. And I've done some vlogging ago, which I have taken a little break from that because I've been busier with sports content. But if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. I also have my other social medias down in the description below. As mentioned, this is my main channel, which is what I mostly do. But I have also made a second channel called Brett Hornby Shorts, where I exclusively have put my short form content on that channel. And what I have done now that we're in the CFL season is that after the game, the Calgary Stampeders game, I post a quick post-game recap on my shorts channel, but here on my main channel, I will get back into doing my Calgary Stampeders this month, recapping how the Stampeders have done. For example, in the first month of the season in August, under these circumstances. And I have also been doing game day posts, where I've now decided I'll just put that up the day before, or just give my feelings on how I feel coming in as a fan on game day. And hopefully there'll be a Labor Day Classic and rematch to do, because I am going to head up to Edmonton for the Labor Day rematch. So that's all I have for this video. So I just want to say, go Stamps go, thanks for watching, and hopefully for the sake of the players on the Edmonton Elks, that they are able to recover and get back into the game. But despite, if you call yourself the Eskimos or the Elks or whatever else, we still are going to beat you on Labor Day. I'll just got to put that out there, and this might actually give us a little bit of advantage under unfortunate circumstances, but it is what it is. So I just want to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.